Okay, it's Monday, October 12th. This is a meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole. And seeing a quorum, I will call this meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons, Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson, Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additions to the agenda? If not, is there a staff report? Libby Tyler.
Last week, a number of staff and other city officials attended the Illinois chapter of the American Planning Association meeting in Normal, Illinois. And I'd like to pass around this handsome plaque, which was awarded to the city for the 2015 Sustainability Award for the Urbana Sustainable Water Management Plan. So I'll pass this around. And the chair of our Sustainability Advisory Commission, Maria Ryan, was there, as well as Chris Storr, to accept the award. Scott Tess had a conflict at that time, so I was able to help to represent his work on it as well. Also at the conference, the program was co-chaired by Lori Pearson. Really successful conference, a lot of education. There were two panels at the city, actually three panels that the city staff were involved in. One was about new trends in zoning pursuant to changes in state law and other trends, and that included zoning approaches to gaming halls or gambling halls, zoning approaches to medical cannabis, and digital billboards. And these topics were presented by Jeff Engstrom and Kevin Garcia and Christopher Marks. Also, I attended a panel on planning skills for growing and declining cities, and our Plan Commission chair, Tyler Fitch, was on a panel for Plan Commission training, which Chris Storr was able to attend. So I want to thank everyone involved and give congratulations to the city on the Sustainability Award.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for Libby? Are there any other staff reports? Okay, we have approval of minutes from September 28th.
I'll make a motion that they be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Roberts and seconded by Madigan for approval of the September 28th minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Okay, next is public input. I have one slip from Tim Larson to talk about sister cities.
I have a PowerPoint to present as well. Let's see if I can get it going here. Okay. My name is Tim Larson. I'm at 207 West California, Urbana. I'm a member of Copper Creek Presbyterian Church. We have a partnership with a Presbyterian church in southern Malawi. I was there last month, and it took the time also to go to Zomba to visit the city there. And I have a short report on that meeting. I had two meetings there. First, I got to meet the new mayor, and I want to extend her greetings to you, Mayor Pressing, and to the City Council from the Honorable Maria Douglas, newly elected mayor of the city of Zomba. They have a map of Urbana, by the way, in her office. I was able to point out to her where I actually live, and we made a little connection with the new mayor there. She was also pleased to find out that Urbana also has a woman mayor, and that was another connection we could make. On Thursday, I met with Musa Mwali, the city administrator, and we toured some of the sites from the sister city projects. First, we went to visit the Zomba City Hospital Guardian Center, where there's an ablution block that was built. This is a toilets and washing and shower facility at the hospital, which is now reporting that is in operation. There is a caretaker who is there who takes in, I believe it's 30 kwacha per use, and he said they get about 30 uses per day at this facility, and about a dozen of those are showers for people who use this facility. We went and visited at their garage the new waste collection truck that has been purchased from the Sister City project. It is almost operational, but not quite yet. We then did visit the compost facility. They showed me around there. This is where the waste is brought in at the beginning of the process and dumped. Then it is sorted. There's 2 sorting times. Here it's a preliminary sort. Most of the plastic has been removed from this waste. Then after a final sort, it's piled into bins that are maybe 4 feet by 8 or 10 feet wide and maybe 5 or 6 feet tall, and composted. And this one bin at the very back is almost ready for to be sold, to be broken down and sold. They have markets. They're going to sell it there at the facility, and they're also going to sell it at other retail places. They're going to bag it in 10 and 20 kg bags for sale. And they're kind of excited that this is a whole new possibility for the city. And they're very excited that this is about to happen. It's almost planting season, so this is appropriate time for them to bring this into market.
And Tim, how many jobs were created by this facility? Do you have any idea?
I saw 8 or 10 people there at the time. They were not sorting at the time. They were just working on the compost. So I'm guessing there may be more than that at when they're fully operational as well. The one issue that they said they had was water. They used a lot of water. There's no water on the site. They had to go to truck from the far other side of their facility to get water with 50-gallon trash cans strapped to wheelbarrows. And there is a sign right there on the building, Zomba, Sister City, Urbana, Illinois. So it's right there in the middle of the town. So I was happy to go visit and represent Urbana, and they were pleased that there's interest from the other side of the world in their city of Zomba.
Well, I got a question.
Okay, Dennis.
So, pretty interesting news that they have now another mayor. I mean, first of all, that they had elections, of course, about a year ago or so, maybe more than that. And then, unfortunately, the mayor had she passed away. She died in office after about a year. So now they elected or they appointed a new mayor? Do you know?
The way they explained it to me is sort of a parliamentary system.
Mm-hmm.
So she is newly elected to the city council and then elected from the city council to become mayor.
Yeah. That's great because, you know, when we worked on the grant projects, all they had were the city administrators, which the lead CEO was appointed by the president of Malawi. They didn't have any elected officials or councilmen at that time, but they were looking forward to the election. So it's so nice to see the process achieved and fulfilled.
They were excited about it, too.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go and meet that lady.
Yeah.
And tell her hello.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
I have one other slip for public input from Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood. They do not wish to speak, but they are continually concerned about the Dr. Ellis sewer problems. And we have a proclamation from the mayor.
Okay, whereas conflict occurs within the natural rhythms of all human relationships, and whereas professional mediators consider conflict resolution a process in which a neutral and impartial third party facilitates communication to promote reconciliation, settlement, and understanding among all parties. And whereas our city acknowledges the benefits of conflict resolution, reinforces its value and effectiveness, and encourages its citizens to continually resolve disputes peacefully within their families, schools, businesses, communities, governments, and the legal system. And whereas there are many benefits to mediation, such as cost effectiveness, participant satisfaction, mediation reduces the emotional toll of conflict, and there is a greater compliance with mediated agreements drafted through timely, expedited negotiations. And the City of Urbana wishes to acknowledge the contribution of Prairie Land Mediation and encourage its future growth. Now therefore I, Laurel Lunt Pressing, Mayor of the City of Urbana, Illinois, do hereby proclaim October 11th through 17th, 2015 as Mediation Week in the City of Urbana, Illinois.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have 3 items for the agenda. The first one is resolution number 2015-10-0858R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement with Visit Champaign County for fiscal year 2015 to 2016. Jane DeLuce from Visit Champaign County is here to talk a little bit, and then Brandon. So who wants to go first?
I'll start things
Okay,
off.
Brandon Boyce.
Yeah, so we're joined by Jane DeLuce, President and CEO of Visit Champaign County. Pursuant to the current fiscal year budget approved by Council, staff has negotiated an agreement with Visit Champaign County. The proposed agreement is in your packet. The amount of the city would contribute toward Visit Champaign County for the fiscal year is $10,000. The agreement would result in a gold partnership level with Visit Champaign County, and the city would have 1 board member on the VCC Board of Directors. That position would be selected by the mayor. However, we have identified Natalie Kenny Marquez, the current Market at the Square Director and Marketing Coordinator, to serve in that role initially. VCC specializes in marketing to visitors from who are coming to Champaign County from over 50 miles away, and they also promote tourism-related sales, including attracting events, tours, hotel stays, and conferences. So as a gold partner, Urbana's tourism-related businesses and events and destinations would be included in those VCC materials and prominently displayed. The agreement is already budgeted, and staff recommends support. And I would add that today, as Economic Development Manager and representing the Urbana Public Arts Program, I participated in a lengthy and well-developed tour of all the public arts we could squeeze into a few hours here in Urbana and also Champaign, with visitors from the Rockford area. I believe there were 6, and that Visit Champaign County organized that trip and allowed us to brag about our public arts program, along with 40 North, Public Art League, the park districts, and others. So I just wanted to share that happened, and it was a good trip, and we did a lot of sharing of the good practices we have in our community for public arts. So I'll turn things over to Jane.
Thank you, Brandon. It was a great day. The weather was beautiful, and it was wonderful to be able to see. We actually looked also at the Boneyard, so we saw that part of the improvement. We saw downtown Urbana, out to Meadowbrook Park, all the way out to Porter Park in West Champaign, as well as downtown Champaign. So the people from Rockford have a lot of permanent art sculptures, but they're looking to create a rotating art exhibit program, and they had identified Champaign-Urbana as a model place to look at. So we appreciated them coming all the way here, and it was a great day. So just a little bit of quick overview of highlights from fiscal year 15. You were a bronze partner in that with your support of the IHSA state football, and so I do want to talk a little bit about, you do have a copy of the annual report in your folder, along with our brand new visitor's guide and a quick fact sheet about what we do. And to thank you for the last year's support with state football, and to go with our work plan theme, which was planting new seeds. You have your own bag of flower bombs, which are wildflowers made right here in Illinois, and you just have to plant them. Don't eat them. They're not edible. So I've had people ask that question with that. So it's a lot of fun and should be bringing about the wildflowers here. So to kind of show our increased economic impact numbers in fiscal year 15, I want to show you a quick video that we featured at our annual Toast to Tourism. So the top 5 things to remember from fiscal year 15 is 1, bringing in the Hot Rod Power Tour with over 3,700 hot rodders as the second stop on the 7-day, 7-city national tour. 2, bringing in the MVP Illinois Lacrosse Tournament, which made its debut in the Midwest, and the Sister Singers Network National Women's Choral Festival, with both groups bringing in visitors from all over the USA and internationally. 3, attending trade shows for new tourism growth markets, including the African American Travel Conference, Active America Travel China Summit, the Diversity Marketplace, and IPW. 4, endorsing a $75,000 tourism private sector grant from the Illinois Office of Tourism to assist the Pygmalion Festival for larger headliners and expanding its scope to include a tech component. And 5, creating Follow the Farmstead, featuring 6 area farms to visitors and residents in partnership with the Champaign County Farm Bureau. Strategic destination management aims to bring stakeholders together to work collaboratively to transform a set of attractions, activities, and services into a cohesive and compelling travel experience or destination. So as we're into fiscal year 16, our work plan theme focuses on Evolve, as we complete a strategic plan entitled Destination 2020. Specific initiatives include transitioning from a destination marketing to a truly destination management organization, including a newly launched revised website, the Fly Champaign-Urbana brand for the airport, and facility development, area directional signage, new construction development, and a unified community branding message. Second, to shift the funding model to increased local revenues through municipal, corporate, and hospitality partners and additional advertising strategies. 3, to convene community conversation about an innovative museum being created in Champaign County to complement the existing museums. 4, to create a hospitality network to build local cohesive support among hotels, retail, restaurants, vendors, and attractions. 5, to create a regional film office in partnership with Shatterglass Films, area location providers, and the Illinois Film Office. And 6, to deliver deeper experiences to travelers by focusing on inspiration, personalization, and a path towards self-discovery. Our success as a destination management organization comes from our tourism partners that are recognized online and in print materials. Our success also comes from a hardworking team who produce results. So a shout out to Leah Longville, Director of Sales, Angie Poe, our Office Manager, Terry Reefsteck, our Vice President of Marketing, Cody Dees, Visitor Services Manager, and Ryan Reed, Sales Manager. To continue our success, we do have to address our current challenges, which right now we are currently operating without 57% of our revenues through the lack of state funding. We've already cut way back on trade shows and sales blitzes. We've cut way back on our marketing strategies, and we've had to cut a staff position, which our team is already 30% smaller than other communities with similar populations. Unless we can make up for this funding locally through public and private partnerships, the work being done to strengthen our community will be severely impacted. We look forward to the City of Urbana coming on as a gold partner, including a board representative. We are here to promote the City of Urbana, specifically your tourism-related businesses, and to also facilitate countywide events and activities that make living in Urbana and Champaign County even better. Last week, we announced the Illinois Society of Association Executives, ISAE, Summer Session 2016, which will bring in 150 meeting planners next July and features 4 ISAE member hotels, including Eastland, Wyndham, Hilton, and Hyatt. I do want to give a shout out to Brandon, who participated earlier today in our public arts tour, also along with Tim Bartlett, who provided the tour of Meadowbrook Park. So I'll close with showing another quick video, which we debuted recently and which truly tells the story of our community, which is anything but ordinary.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Jane? Dennis?
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming, and those videos are certainly high quality and very exciting to watch. And I'm glad that we're in partnership again with the county as a whole, and I'm pleased that we're going to become gold members with representative standing on the board. I think that's appropriate. So we're kind of, and I guess we're kind of healed, I guess, or something as far as the cohesiveness of the partnership and working on tourism and those kinds of goals that are exemplified by this agreement. So I appreciate, I think, all the members of the council who may support it, and Brandon Boyce for working on it as well. I was looking through the agreement. It's very thorough. It has a lot of information in it. It provides a lot of services, I see. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is the compensation that the city is providing to the Visitor Bureau is also, it mentions that there's complimentary, let me think, what is it? I guess it's complimentary services as part of that, potentially, that there would be, as part of the funding matrix. Let's see. And I'm just wondering, I guess either you or Brandon might want to comment about what kind of services might be involved in those kinds of complimentary additional funding, or as count as funding toward the $10,000 or above. I didn't make that very clear because I'm doing this from memory, and I don't have the page open, but
I believe you're referring to page 2 under city obligations. There's
Right.
both city monetary funding and city in-kind services.
in-kind services,
And
that's the word, yes.
This has been a standard structure in all of the agreements we've had in recent months with UBA, Pygmalion, Sweet Corn, Fulton Roots. It just so happens in this instance that we weren't able to identify any in-kind services that we currently provide to VCC, but the agreement is structured in such a way so as not to preclude us from providing in-kind services. And the city tends to provide in-kind services for major events. It's common for the city to help out with the marathon, with Pygmalion Music Fest, even when the city hasn't been a direct sponsor of those events. We contribute in many small ways that actually can add up to substantial amounts. And so even though we couldn't come up with one specifically, we wanted to make sure the agreement was structured in such a way that would allow it. But the intention was really for anything that the city might do, as it normally would for a large-scale event, that wouldn't count against the $10,000 cash contribution that's being made.
So just in my mind, the only thing I could think of would be providing police or security services during an event, and you know, and the value of that per hour or something like that. Is that one of the ones that would be included, or would it probably not?
I believe that's happened historically for major events, but I believe in recent years that our officers' hours have been billed. So the decision of the police chief and the policy of the department is what we would adhere to in the future. But if there were in-kind contributions made by the police department, it would fall under that section.
Okay. Yeah, that's the only thing I kind of wondered about. It looks like a pretty good agreement, and I would say certainly useful to the city of Urbana.
Diane.
I'm really happy that we're rejoining Visit Champaign County, and your marketing materials make me want to visit my own community, so I think they're very effective. And I think the value, especially that you bring to this partnership, is that you'll complement the locally focused efforts that are ongoing now by UBA and the city of Urbana. So I think together it's going to be a much stronger partnership and a much more effective outreach. So welcome back.
Any other questions for Jane? Diane?
Nope. And I would like to move resolution number 2015-10-058R to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Marlin, seconded by Madigan to move resolution number 2015-10-058R to council with a recommendation for approval. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A word about the gift that was passed out. These are wildflower seeds, not snacks. Yeah, so you can spread some color throughout your neighborhood. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. They look like little chocolate bonbons or something. Next is resolution number 2015-10-059 2010-059R, a resolution adopting the Lehrman Neighborhood Community Assessment. Libby Tyler from Community Development.
Hello again. This resolution is asking for council approval of adoption of the Lehrman Neighborhood Community Assessment. And many of you have been involved very heavily in this neighborhood and participated in the events that were held in, excuse me, 2013 and 2014 to prepare this assessment. There was a very extensive survey that was conducted working with LNAC, with the Neighborhood Action Committee and a subcommittee of that group. A lot of citizen surveyors. We surveyed a very high percentage of residents in the Lehrman neighborhood. We had an open house. We had a survey blitz. We had a charrette. We had a fantastic intern who was leading the effort, Aaron Bond, who has since received his master's in urban planning and moved on to do good things for the city of Baltimore's neighborhoods. And the Lehrman Neighborhood Action Committee, and of course Dennis Roberts and Robin Arbiter and Bill Brown and Diane Marlin have all been very involved with this group, and Kelly Murkowski on our staff as well, continues to work with the suggestions in the assessment and do many other activities. You've also heard from staff a few times on preparatory activities for redevelopment of Urbana townhomes, and had at least one presentation by Herman and Kittle, who was the developer selected by the Housing Authority and the city working together. We're under an agreement with the Housing Authority, intergovernmental agreement to pursue that redevelopment, which will involve redevelopment on the Urbana townhome site and extensive renovation of the Aspen Court site. Most recently, a few months back, we entered into a lease to allow for site control. And this was all activities to help with the funding that would be required for the redevelopment and the renovation. Staff is asking tonight for formal adoption of this 2014 assessment as a planning document that can help to qualify for some of those funding sources for the project. Ordinarily, with planning studies of this sort, we do presentation, we might accept them, but we don't always adopt. And in this case, the funding agencies look for that adoption. We will also have already asked the LNAC board if they would similarly adopt it, but this would help with the funding application that Herman and Kittle is putting together this month. And I think those are, I provided a summary of the assessment and a link, and, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I know that Dennis has a communication on this as well, so.
Any questions for Libby? Mike?
So I noticed that there's no fiscal impact section in the memo. Obviously, we're talking about funding here, seeking funding, and I understand that it may not be the city directly seeking funding, but is there a fiscal component for the city to this?
I think for the actual adoption of the assessment, there is not a direct fiscal impact for the city. The assessment does appear in the council goals. There may be a fiscal impact for city funding down the road when we're actually reviewing a development. They may make a request. In fact, I know they're preparing a request for home funding, which is part of our HUD allocation. But for the adoption of this assessment that's already been completed, that in itself does not create a fiscal impact. I guess there could be a benefit in that it would provide for funding from, would make it more eligible for funding from Federal Home Loan Bank and the Illinois Housing Development Authority in the form of tax credits and other financing. So it would be beneficial in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that adopting the assessment isn't costing the city anything other than the cost of the paper that this is written on, basically. But I guess what I'm more interested in is down the road, and maybe it's hard to quantify, but there would be there very well could be a local, a city fiscal impact.
And I was remembering in the lease agreement, we talked about payments to the city as part of that agreement, because we do own some of this real estate, and there is a provision for payment in lieu of taxes for housing authority properties. So I think there could be revenue streams coming from the project upon completion, as well as a cost if we do provide the grant funds. So
Okay,
you're
thank
correct
you.
there.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? And Dennis, you have something?
Yeah, of course, I really support this. This is really, this adoption is really to help Herman and Kittle as they prepare their financial package to support the development in the future, and also it's going to assist them in getting federal credits and for home resources for the most needy people within the community. And if you looked at the assessment, the section, the District 1 or the Section 1 of the 3 that are outlined as individual components of the overall survey, the greatest needs, the greatest disparities, and the greatest amount of individual economic stress all occur in Section 1, which is the Lehrman neighborhood specifically. And this is where the project is going to be built and the Aspen Court improved. So, of course, I worked, not only did I go door to door during the survey, but I helped in a lot of the planning before and afterward, just as Bill and Diane also participated. And so I really support it. And I want to read a letter, an email that I received today from Robin Arbiter. She served as the president of the LNAC community group for like 4 or 5 years. She just recently retired that post, but she wants us to know in her email that she says, I quote, "I support the adoption of the 2014 Lehrman Neighborhood Community Assessment by the Urbana City Council tonight. The assessment, a truly collaborative effort between the city staff, neighborhood residents, the Lehrman Neighborhood Action Committee, and partnering stakeholders, is a crucial document, a critical document, in planning for the neighborhood. At this time, the city's adoption of these assessments will help move forward much-needed rehabilitation and construction of housing where much affordable housing has been lost, 161 units in the last 15 years. In addition, I encourage adoption of the 2014 Lehrman Neighborhood Community Assessment by LNAC at the earliest possible date, and that date would probably be tomorrow night." So that's from Robin Arbiter. So, I don't know, to move the item along, I'm going to suggest that Resolution 2015-010-059R, resolution adopting the Lehrman Neighborhood Community Assessment, be approved by the Committee of the Whole and sent with recommendation of approval to City Council.
It's been moved by Roberts and seconded by Smythe to send resolution number 2015-10-059R to the City Council with recommendation for approval. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you. Next is ordinance number 2015-10-105, an ordinance revising the fiscal year 2015-2016 annual budget METCAD funding. This was proposed by Alderwoman Marlin, and we also have Ralph Caldwell here, METCAD director, to answer questions. And it looks like Mike Monson's actually going to do the talking first.
I'm going to give a short background on this. The mayor asked me to put together some information. So this is a chart of METCAD user fees. this dates back to 1979-80, and it's one of the reasons we are where we're at. As you can see, well, let me explain. The user fees generate about $3.3 million of MetCAD's total budget of $5.2 million. The rest of the MetCAD's income basically comes from surcharges on cell phones and landlines, which bring in about $1.85 million annually. And as most of you probably know, the surcharges have been declining in recent years as people switch from landlines to cell phones. We get about $1.50 per month for landlines, and until January we'll get 87 cents per cell phone. Right now we get 65 cents. The user fees are the primary source of funding, and what's happened here through most of the 2000s, if you look over here, the percentage increases in user fees, you'll see that for most of the 2000s, the increases were pretty minor. Here, less than 1%. Actually, I think from 97, 98 to 04, 05, you'll see that the user fees are 1.3 million. Now, it varied a little bit about, but they were all 1.3 million over 7 years. So, in 04, 05, I think the board made some sort of pledge they were hopeful to fund it 8% a year, but they never quite got there. There was one year they got close with 7% here in 07, 08. And then the Great Recession hit, and there was actually a reduction in funding. And then they put the reduction back, and then the next year there was 0.5% increase. So over 3 years, you're almost flat. So Mr. Caldwell said when he came on as director of MetCAD in 9/10, he feared that the agency's capital development fund was going to be largely depleted in an agency that relies on expensive cutting-edge technology. He said he then worked out a 5-year, quote, get us out of the hole budget plan with the Champaign Finance Department. So let me get another chart here. So that plan began in fiscal year 12-13 with an average 18% increase. That was the MetCAD average, and was that average for all the member agencies. We're now in the 4th year of 5 years of planned significant increases. During the past 4 years, Urbana's user fees have increased a cumulative 109%. Oops. There we go. So you can see the MetCAD cumulative increase over these 5 years was 104. Over these 4 years was 104%. We pretty closely paralleled that. Champaign was less. The county sheriff was quite a bit more, and UI police was a little bit less than us. Most of these increases, excuse me. As you're aware, these MetCAD increases have been difficult for Urbana to absorb, along with obviously the reduction in property taxes due to local hospitals being declared property tax exempt. There have been some, these are some charts that actually show these increases here. And so these are the annual increases for the different member agencies. They're all pretty much the same until 2014-15. And the reason behind that is that's the year that Rantoul joined MetCAD. And with Rantoul joining, they changed the funding formula. The current funding formula is an average. They use calls for service and also the number of police officers. And it did result in some changes. It's worth noting that Rantoul joining MetCAD was a net positive. MetCAD hired 3 additional dispatchers and also increased their overtime to accommodate adding Rantoul. This change partially accounts for the large and varied spike in user fees among agencies in that 1 year. It's worth noting that Urbana's fee increase under the old formula and the new formula would have been pretty much the same. One great benefit of adding Rantoul was it enabled the agency to add a third radio frequency and to sufficiently staff it. And that means Urbana now shares a radio frequency with the U of I, and other radio frequency has, Champaign has their own, and the County Sheriff's Office now shares a frequency with Rantoul. Previously, Urbana shared a radio frequency with the sheriff and the U of I police, and radio traffic would get crowded at times, particularly on weekends. So with all these fee increases, according to Ralph, I talked to him this morning about it, the capital fund is pretty well sufficiently funded. There is a planned purchase this year of a $1.3 million radio console replacement. And for the next 5 or so budget years, METCAD plans to put about $500,000 in capital funding from its budget. It should be noted that that capital expenditure, because of the state budget situation, may be put on hold. They're no different from cities. We're all in a state of waiting. So we've got one more chart. This shows the potential increases in subsequent years. So we've got one more year of what looks like it'll be a pretty good increase, 16%. Now that could go down slightly because we're supposed to get more income from cell phones with the change in state law, and it might be an additional $200,000 or $400,000. We're not quite sure how much, but if, after that, we're still slated for a good increase, and then the increases will graduate down to about 6% a year. So on top of this, all these local funding issues, obviously, is the state budget situation. As the mayor mentioned to you a couple weeks ago, we're not getting state use tax receipts. That's over $800,000 a year. We're not getting video gaming, which should be about $300,000 a year, and we're not getting state motor fuel tax funding, about $1 million a year if that goes out over a year, which is about $2 million for the city. Now, METCAD is in a similar boat, and they're currently not receiving cell phone surcharge income. That's about $1 million a year. And according to Ralph, with the change in state law with 911 funding, that would be a state appropriation, and if the budget impasse isn't resolved, they'll also lose the landline money, which is about $830,000 annually. So that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
Any questions for Mike? Diane?
This may be for Mike or Mr. Caldwell. That 5-year plan for capital improvement, was that developed with the policy board's approval? And did the policy board vote on that?
I'm going to defer to Ralph on that.
And I guess if you could describe what went into, what comprises that capital?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Ralph Caldwell, like you said earlier. Yes, all along, when I came here in December of 2009, I realized that they had a capital plan in place, but they didn't have a funding mechanism for it because it was hard times because of the recession, like Mike said, so they had been spending out of their capital plan to stay afloat. So to backfill your capital plan, because the policy board asked to set up a 10-year plan for capital purchases. So to do that, and they wanted a level payment plan, we had to move some equipment purchases out, level it out, and then basically put about $490,000 in the plan every single year to fund it for the entire 10 years. And again, like you said earlier, the policy board directed that, and they voted on that, to pass that.
Diane?
And what kind of equipment are we talking about?
Basically all our technology needs. They built, in 2005, they built a radio system for almost $8 million in the county. Peoria just built one this year. I think they spent $15 million for Peoria County. So the prices have been going up. So when they built that in 2005, I think Bruce Walden was your representative on the policy board. They made the statement that you need an 8% increase to maintain this expensive equipment. We also have what we call a CAD system, which is a computerized dispatch, where we track the officers, we track the calls for service, we track the firefighters, the ambulance companies, and so forth. And then one of the biggest other ticket items that we have, we just replaced last fiscal year, our 911 phone system, which was right around $600,000. And so what we do is, in our replacement plan, we try to follow the industry standards. When does everybody replace the new equipment? When is a good time to do that? Because we can't afford a failure. If the equipment breaks and you can't get through to 911, whose fault is it? Well, it's either going to be my fault as the director because I didn't advise the policy board properly, or to be the policy board for not directing us to stay current with equipment. Just like your police department and your fire department, you want the best equipment for your firefighters and your police officers. Our business is based on personnel and huge cost on the technology side because everything is going to computerized systems now. Everything needs a maintenance agreement, or you don't have to sign a maintenance agreement. If something happens, you may not be in the current version, or you may not get backup to help put your system back online. So obviously the board wanted to be proactive, and so they want to make sure our equipment is up and running 24/7. We never shut down, I mean, like police and fire. So that's what they set in motion.
Dennis?
And so, okay, we totally appreciate the fact that equipment costs money. Had there been breakdowns in the equipment in the last 5 years? I mean, is that why you're concerned about the replacement right now?
No, we're not concerned about replacement now. We've always been, at least since I've been here, we've always been concerned about the replacement, and the policy board has. So we want to make sure we have current state-of-the-art equipment so that we have the best for our first responders in the community that we serve.
And had there been any breakdowns in the last 5 years?
Yeah, we had our battery backup system went down. Actually, what it did is it overheated and started throwing gas down in the basement that was coming up in our dispatch center, where we called the Urbana Fire Department. We thought we were going to have to evacuate the building. The problem is, if we evacuated the building back then, we would have had to have gone to Rantoul, and they have one chair set aside for us. Rantoul's really small. They had one chair. We have 5 dispatchers. So they don't have the capabilities to take us if we had to vacate that building. Fortunately, the fire department came in, they aired out the basement. I think we disconnected all the batteries, the backup batteries for our systems, and in a few days we were able to replace that. But that was one of the equipment purchases that we pushed out. That was in the capital plan that we pushed out. And that was a perfect example about how if we would have stayed on target, we wouldn't have had to call the fire department, we wouldn't have been in a bind. I mean, we had one foot out the door thinking, where do we go now? We knew where we were going, but how are we going to make this work? How are we going to give the service to the first responders and track everybody the way we do if we're in our own facility? And so it put us in a heck of a bind for a moment. And fortunately, your fire department was great. They took extra time before they were going to force us to evacuate. They let us stay in. They were able to air out the basement and disconnect what they needed to disconnect.
And are you using the older equipment as backup to the new equipment that you purchase?
That's the goal. We have not put that in place yet. We just recently signed an agreement with the board's approval to rent out space in Fire Station 6 of Champaign Fire Department. When they built the facility, they were forward-thinking, and they saved space for a backup center for the dispatch center. So it just took us several years to get to that point. So we have the space rented. The plan is to move our old phone system that's stacked up in an office at MedCAD right now to the backup. If we had to vacate our building with the new 911 phone system, we'd at least have a phone system where we could have 6 dispatchers go and sit at 6 consoles. One of the projects that Mike talked about was our radio consoles, and that's basically our furniture and our radios that are mounted to the furniture that dispatch first responders. That's due to be replaced. Actually, that's like 2 or 3 years out that we pushed out, so we're kind of behind on replacing that. The goal is to replace that this fiscal year, depending on the state when they free up some of our monies, and then take that old system to the backup. Since we won't be using it at the backup, hopefully the longevity will last longer so that if we did have to leave our facility where we're at now, we have somewhere to go and sit and dispatch. Receive 911 calls on the old phone system and use our radio system to dispatch first responders.
Mayor Preston?
Well, Ralph, I think you've done a great job, especially your ordeal with the state commission. We do have a backup with Vermilion County, correct?
Correct. What they do is they take our 911 calls. There's no radio communications between Vermilion County and us because it's outside their FCC license and our FCC license. There's no CAD system, computer system set up. So the goal is to send 2 people today to Vermilion County if we can't receive 911 calls. They would take the calls. They would call us on the phone wherever we end up because we're not at our backup yet. We haven't put the old phone system and radio system in place yet. So we would probably have to go to the U of I front desk and take as many people as we can fit in there and use paper and cards and jot down what Vermilion County dispatchers tell us and then use our portable radios to send police and fire out on the calls for service that they would be. So it would work temporarily, but for a long term, that would certainly not be a place where the U of I would want us or that we would want to be. But right now, that's kind of our backup plan. So Vermilion County, yes, takes our backup if our lines are cut for 911s, but that's the only capability that they have.
Could you describe what the new state law is trying to accomplish and whether you think the financing is adequate?
Yeah, I do not think it's adequate. I sit on the 911 Service Advisory Board. We negotiated for a year trying to get better legislation for surcharge. Like it was mentioned earlier, our total surcharge monies have been declining and our user fees have been going up. And so basically our users have been filling that gap with the declining revenue. And so we wanted to level that off. Actually, we wanted to get more money than that, but for the surcharge. But the legislators wouldn't allow that. We had 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, 2 representatives and 2 senators on our 911 advisory board, and they said we will not take this forward. They drew the line at 87 cents, and I don't know if that was preconceived ahead of time or if negotiations got us to that. But right now, as of January 1st, instead of 73 cents on your phone bill, it'll say 87 cents when it comes January 1st. Our wire line also, your members of your community and the Champaign County as a whole, instead of paying $1.50 that the voters voted in, the new fee on your phone, your wireline phone, your home phone or business phone, will show 87 cents. But the state's going to backbill this county to $1.50 on our wireline. So even though we're only collecting $1.50, 87 cents from our folks in this county, we're going to receive for every hard line we have $1.50. How do you make that up? DuPage County pays, for an example, 50 cents for their hard lines. So they're going to be paying 87 cents. So some of the money's coming out of their county into the counties that had a higher wireline fee. So we're hoping somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000 of additional surcharge revenue. The problem is they froze our wireless checks. They're receiving them. They're a pass-through. The state's a pass-through. We take it off the phone bills. We give it to the state. The state gives us to our centers. And it's frozen right now. So we can't track how much money we should have received under the new system because it doesn't take place till January. And if they don't free up the money, we won't have any trends to track. So we want to track the new monthly checks that we should be receiving to see what is the new gain per month compared to the last several years, so we can estimate in future years and future budgets what our increase is. But right now there's a lot of unknowns, and if the state doesn't free up our money here soon, that puts us in a different bind than what we're talking about tonight.
Wouldn't you say that, did you ever get an explanation about why the legislature let Chicago go from $2 for cell phones and landlines up to $3 and left the whole rest of the state at 87 cents?
It's pretty much $3.90. It's not $3. What the legislators did is they gave the Chicago City Council the approval to go up to $3.90 on their cell phones. So their out is, we did not raise taxes. The Chicago City Council raised taxes. And there's a lot of votes in the Chicago area. So to pass any legislation for 911 throughout the state, you have to have the support of Chicago. And the word out of Chicago was, you guys are getting 87 cents, and their city council is going to set it at $3.90, and that's the end of the story. So either keep what you have and have your revenue decline, or buy into this new proposal. And what we gave up as a state was consolidation. There's a lot of counties that have 14 or 15 dispatch centers in them. I shouldn't say a lot, there's a few. And there's a lot of counties that have multiple dispatch centers in them. The governor and the Democrats from the House and the Senate want to see consolidation. They want to see efficiencies. Fortunately, in this county, you all, before I got here, were way ahead of the times, and we already were consolidated. And when we brought Rantoul on, that was the last piece of the puzzle to bring on to be completely consolidated. So we had the Lieutenant Governor visit our center because she wanted to use us as a model for the state to show that it does work in other counties. So start, getting rid of basically some of your dispatch centers. So there's a mandate throughout the state, depending on how many you have, you're forced by 2017, I think it is, to reduce your centers in half. So if you have 15, you have to go down to 7 or 8. If you have 6, you have to go down to 3. It doesn't impact us, the consolidation that we gave up, because we were already consolidated. So again, we were ahead of the curve, and it's not an issue. That's why this is so important to resolve our issues and bring everybody back together at the table, because we certainly don't want to go backwards, and I don't know if the state would really give us permission to go backwards if somebody wanted to jump out of a consolidated center and be their own dispatch center. So, and I'm hoping we're not going in that direction.
Well, I don't think anybody wants to get out of MetCad, but I think there's a real financing problem here at the local level because our voters approved $1.50 maybe 25 years ago, and $1.50 then is not worth what $1.50 is today. So that's one problem. But we got hit with a 28% increase, and that was just when we lost all our property tax from the hospitals. So you're familiar with me coming to the MetCad board and saying, we can't really scrape up another $127,000, but we'd like to spread it over 5 years. And I think that might be the solution to this, that you've got this thing so front-loaded that it's really hard for Urbana to pay the increases that you're asking. And, you know, we got a 28% increase, and the city of Champaign got a 1% increase. I'm going to be meeting with Dorothy David in the next few weeks to try to resolve this, but when we cut the increases, we didn't vote for 8% every year because of the recession. That was because we just needed the operating money for our own budgets, and so we cut the capital outlay, and that's sort of a typical thing to do. And I think, you know, I get accused of not being for public safety, and I'm the one that worked to get public safety be the #1 goal of the city council and the mayor in this city. So I'm very committed to MetCad, and as you know, the financing is a problem throughout the state. And when I asked for this spreading out the $127,000 over 5 years, we've been paying that. We paid the first payment this year. But I also pledged that I would work to change the state law. And what I think we need to do is get, your commission is only for like 2 years, right?
Correct.
Is to get that commission to get a study on the financial impact on all the local governments that are getting the 87 cents. Because when we started out 4 years ago, we were paying $327,000, which is roughly the current cost of 3 police officers. Now we're up to $682,000, which is the cost of 6 police officers. So this is skyrocketing faster than anything else. And in the meantime, we're not getting our revenue from the state, and neither is MetCad. So I'm saying that this is not the time to add $94,000 to our budget. The fund balance, which is listed in the amendment as what we're going to tap into, that's only an estimate, and that's based on our getting our full revenue. We're not getting our full revenue, so it's a fantasy that we can just, you know, dip into that. So I think the solution is to smooth out the payments for capital improvements so we have constant percentage increases. MetCad would end up with the same amount of money, and I would imagine that as this state crunch hits every government, I'm asking that it be smoothed out for everybody, not just Urbana. I think there's a better way of paying for it. But let's not just focus on the tree, which is the current budget thing in MetCad. Our real problem is the forest, which is the whole state funding system. They set this up so that users, meaning the phone users, would be paying for it, but instead the city and the county and the university have been paying for it, and we don't have that kind of budget flexibility to add these huge amounts. So what I think the solution is we need a coalition of local governments, and that's something I'm working on, to lobby the legislature to let us charge at least what our voters approved more than 20 years ago, which would be $1.50. And I also think it needs to be adjusted annually for inflation. And I'm willing to work on that coalition. And everybody that I've talked to around the state is very interested in this. And we just ran into this roadblock that the chairman of the committee, Mr. Bradley, Representative Bradley, obviously had been given a mission that we're not supposed to go over a certain amount. And not how can we adequately fund public safety in Illinois, but I think it was the phone companies that said, we don't want 102 different rates. Well, they don't have to have 102 different rates. They could just let us have the rate that our voters approved, or they could have 3 rates, $1, $1.50, or $2, and let the local government choose, because we're not all alike. DuPage County can get away with 50 cents. They're going to get 87 cents that they don't need, and we need $1.50.
I actually had a couple of questions. On the new state legislation that was passed, it also mentioned network costs. The state will cover network costs. Is that right?
Yes, it's the network cost throughout the state. All our costs are similar, so if you're in a small county and you don't bring in a lot of surcharge money and you don't have a lot of users to your agency, you're getting by on a shoestring budget. So what they're going to do is they're going to pay all our network cost off the top before they send any of the surcharge money out. So they're going to take the expenditure line items out of our budget, but they're also taking the revenue out of our budget and paying the network costs. And so it basically helps some of the smaller counties, not so much MedCat.
So that doesn't cover the microwave generator towers? Or I noticed a couple of big items, the microwave generator and network.
No, they're pretty much phone lines. You need so many phone lines coming in, 911 phone lines, things like that, that we have to pay to AT&T and the Verizons and things like that to keep the center up. It's not really the capital purchases, if you will. It's the expenses, the recurring expenses that happen every month and every year annually. And if I could just make one point, and I know you had a busy schedule today, the 28% increase, just to make that clear, if we don't bring Rantoul on and we don't break out the frequencies that the chiefs and the sheriff really, really wanted for public safety, your increase that year would have been 16% like everybody else's. But to bring Rantoul on at the same time to help cover some of the cost of the frequency sharing, that's what took yours up to 28%. We went through 20 different formulas, if you will, to try to find a formula that was fair for everybody sitting at the table. The chiefs, myself, and the sheriff went through all these formulas, and we took them to the policy board. So this wasn't something that we just threw a dart at and said, let's try this. The sheriff really, really got hit the hardest, and the county chair, or deputy, I should say the county administrator said, I'll work with you to get it in your budget. So Urbana wasn't the only ones in that bind, but your user fees didn't go up 28% just because that was the next year to raise fees. It should have went up 16, but because we did consolidate and you actually bought extra dispatchers so that your police department will not share one dispatcher with 3 organizations. They share one dispatcher with 2 now. So you gained something for that purchase above and beyond that 16%, and Pat could speak to that, or Chief Connolly if he wishes to.
And then just for clarification, on the $1.50 that we were getting, you said the state was going to make up that difference. Is that just temporarily, or is there a sunset on that, or is that expected to be ongoing?
The whole thing sunsets in 2 years anyway, and so it's going to have to be reevaluated. And like the mayor said, we need to look at better ways to fund 911 centers throughout the state, and I think that's going to be the goal of the new board. I was originally appointed under Governor Quinn. Now I've been reappointed under Governor Rauner for this statewide board, so we're in a pretty good position because we have a voice from this county sitting on the statewide board. And some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm not really quiet and shy and laid back, so believe it or not, after a while, Bradley goes, go ahead, Ralph, go ahead. What are you going to cry about Champaign County? So our voice is being heard. I just wish that we could have gotten more than the 87 cents, but it was better than nothing. So it was one of those car deals where, you know, this is the best you're going to get. Do you want it or not? If not, drive your old car that you had before that's getting ready to break.
Okay, Diane?
Well, I absolutely agree we need to change the legislation, and that downstate got the short end of the stick. But back to the tree rather than the forest, and the reason I brought this budget amendment forward is that Urbana sent in a deficient payment in July to MedCAD. The city received a letter dated August 6th that said, your payment is deficient. What's the explanation? Apparently, as I'm told, the city gave no explanation, and the city received the lead agency received another letter on a memo to the policy board on September 25th, and I saw a copy of that, and that's what alarmed me, because in that policy board, and I'm going to read the paragraph that leapt out at me, it stated, In addition to other this is a quote, in addition to other collection remedies that the policy board might consider, Section 12 of the intergovernmental agreement provides that the board could formally declare Urbana to be in default of its payment obligations and direct the City of Champaign as lead agency to issue a notice directing Urbana to pay the outstanding balance due within 30 days, or METCAD may terminate dispatching services to the City of Urbana. I mean, this basically, worst case scenario, they could issue a shut-off notice to the City of Urbana. They did give the city time, basically the month of October before the November 5th meeting, for the city to rectify the situation, request alternative consideration, or provide a satisfactory explanation for the deficiency. Now, until we heard tonight about a meeting in a few weeks with Champaign, there had been no formal response to this memo either. So we are currently in breach of the intergovernmental agreement that we signed, and every other participating member of METCAD has paid in full for the first quarter anyway. So I believe we should have budgeted what we owe for this year. When our budget was put together, this is not a surprise. This amount was known long before our budget was put together. I don't think the city, at least I didn't appreciate the situation when the budget was put together, or I wouldn't have approved a budget that was short by $94,000. So the city council can do its part tonight by passing the budget amendment to allocate the full amount, and we can make the first quarter payment, make up the deficiency in the first quarter payment. And if there's negotiations to be done for the rest of the year, I'm all for that. But this is, nothing has been apparently officially done to this point. At least that's the message I'm getting. So I know the mayor is a member of the policy board, and the other members are either the police chief or the fire chief on alternating years. So it's not like Urbana has not been at the table all along. We were part of these decisions
Mayor
in
Preston?
turning the capital
Yeah,
plan.
I would like to respond to the allegation that we didn't respond. As soon as we got the first letter, Elizabeth, our finance director, did call Champaign. I had a conversation with the mayor of Champaign, Deb Finan, and I explained what this whole context is, and I also said what had happened in the recession. The whole board had agreed that we were going to suspend the capital program because we had to concentrate just on operations. And I know Deb Busey has said that if they don't get the state money, that we're going to have to reconsider the budget. So what I am asking is that we just smooth out these payments. I'm not saying I want to spend less or that I don't want to buy the equipment. I want the equipment to be right. But on the other hand, it wasn't really right to insist that Urbana had to pay 28%, and they agreed to smooth it out. And so that's what I'm asking that we do again. And it would be up to them if they want to do it for everybody, but certainly that would be a very simple solution. Maybe we need a mediator.
I think we're bordering on discussion. Are there any other questions for Mr. Caldwell? If not, is
Yeah,
there...
this is Charlie. I've got a quick one.
Yeah, go ahead,
Can you
Charlie.
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Ralph, could you explain to me a little bit more why the capital fund is so front-loaded to the first 5 years as opposed to across all 10 years?
Yeah, finance put that together with the city of Champaign. It just depends on the year that you're coming up against, what capital equipment purchases, and it's in the back of our budget book that you all received, and it also shows a graph of that. So we have to meet every single year. We have to meet that, and they wanted a level payment plan of the $490,000, like I said earlier. So it's really not front-loaded. What we're doing is we're taking the money that we shorted ourselves over the last 10 or 15 years, and we're building that back up. So every year we're never underwater so we don't have to borrow money, if you will, to make our capital purchases. And that's with a couple not layoffs, but we lost a couple positions, and we pushed equipment purchases out and so forth. So we've done everything we can with our expenditures. It's just our declining revenue, the position we're all in, and that's what it came out to. But we looked at several scenarios, and we're willing to look at more, and I don't think the door is shut with the policy board on anything. It's just so everybody knows, we actually contract with Champaign to collect our fees and our bills. That's why Champaign collects and is asking for the proper remittance of the check. So it's just, that's the position we're in right now. And but I'd be willing to sit down with anybody. My door's always open if anybody has any suggestions. But this is the direction the board gave me to move on, and that's why I moved in this direction.
And my second question is based on the lack of revenue coming in from the states. How long can MedCat operate if there are no monies coming from the state?
Yeah, we've talked about that at the last policy board meeting. I think we're probably good for a year if we don't purchase some equipment. The double-edged sword of that is that you're hoping your equipment stays up and running. And if we don't replace our radios in our console room with our furniture, then we don't have that for the backup. So there's a lot of moving parts to our replacement plan right now, since we're trying to renovate, if you will, or add old equipment to a rented space. And so it's not a real easy thing. But I think right now what we'd probably do, the board would probably say, sit on that $1.3 million for that replacement of your radio consoles and furniture until we can see if this breaks loose. And then when it does, when we get reimbursed from the state, then make that purchase. But I can't speak for them because they haven't made that decision yet. So, and just so everybody knows also, these double-digit increases, Mayor Pressing, not to put her on the spot, but your city council or the mayor has voted yes, including the 28%. And so, you know, when I read some of these newspaper articles, or I see some of these TV accounts, this isn't anything that's a surprise to anybody. This isn't anything MedCat did. Your representative voted yes on every single year. You knew double digits were coming, and then this is the last year you decided not to vote yes for. And she has been super trying to help us at the legislative level. She's come to Springfield with me. She's been a great 911 rep for me. But it just didn't work. She's only one person, and I'm only one person, and I think we still get the best deal. But there's no surprises here, and we're part of your family. We're like a firefighter or a police officer. You're contracting us to do service that you don't want to do with your own people because it would be too expensive. So I'm hoping this doesn't end up adversarial. I'm hoping we can work through all this. Your first responders are fantastic to work with. Anytime we need anything or they do, we sit down and we work it out. Mayor Pressing's been a great board member, but this isn't any surprise, or shouldn't be a surprise. It's just the situation that we're in, and I think it can be resolved. So.
Okay, Dennis.
And so one of the reasons why we're seeing a spike in the percentage of how much the rates have gone up for us in this particular year is because we've added now Rantoul into the partnership, and we're trying to accommodate extra services for them as well as for us. Is that correct?
No, the big hit was the frequency breakout. We could have added Rantoul onto the trio, so you would have had another community, another police department on your trio, which I don't know what we would call it, Pat, quad something, which just wouldn't have worked. I mean, the trio wasn't working properly. You were risking your officers, so you were paying the extra money over the 16%. You were paying for your police department to be broke out with the U of I Police Department and not share it with the county. And then the county's paying for just to be with Rantoul instead of the 3 agencies they were with before. So that's what you bought with anything above the 16%. Because if it stayed the same and we didn't bring Rantoul on, your fees that year would have been 16% increase.
Well, if this is a partnership, why wasn't this also affecting Champaign?
So, well, you know, we ran through 20 formulas. Every formula reduced Champaign's because they were paying the lion's share. They were, some would say, we're overpaying for all these years. And so what every single formula did, there wasn't one formula that raised their fee. Every formula reduced their fee. And I'm not an accountant, so I worked with the City of Champaign's Finance Department and brought it to the policy board and sat down with all the chiefs, and we ran all the numbers. We had attorneys in the room, the sheriff's an attorney, and we had very smart people in the room. And so it was just the idea that since they were the biggest users for, you know, for years and years and years, they accepted that payment for all these years.
Sure, and that seems pretty fair. They're the biggest users,
Correct.
And they have the biggest fee, right?
Correct, and they weren't complaining about that.
Right.
But
we're still in partnership. I mean,
sure.
In a partnership situation, you share the ups and the downs financially, just like any other business would.
Right. They wanted.
But they're only getting a 1% raise, and we're getting 28%. And we're dividing this up so that it benefits all the partnerships involved, right? all the partnerships benefit by this because there is fewer, there is more open lines to respond and receive responses.
Correct, correct.
By dividing them apart.
Yeah, they needed something to take back to their city council to sell. They couldn't say all the formulas show that we should be saving money, but we want to pay an extra $300,000 a year. They couldn't sell that to their city council. Now, if that's a suggestion of yours, I'm okay with that. I mean, I just need X amount of dollars to run the dispatch center. How it comes into the center, it really doesn't impact me. It's up to the policy board, basically, to make it right. And that's what they settled on. That's what they voted on. That's what the mayor voted on. So if there's issues,
I would say I voted no on the budget.
this year's, but the
Yeah.
past 4 years with the double
Well,
digit,
and
and
then I
bringing Rantoul on was the biggest hit to all of us, and that's the yes vote that Urbana voted for. So,
Yeah, I support that.
No,
I'm
I
just
agree.
saying I want to change the way we pay it, not that we won't pay it.
And
And
I-
I want to look at the big picture. 'cause
Sure, and I
that's-
think
that's
that
the underlying problem.
the policy board will probably listen to all the suggestions. They just want to hear what the suggestions that Urbana has. So,
Okay, is there a motion?
I have one more question.
Yeah, Charlie?
Ralph, what do the ambulance companies pay?
right now, they don't pay anything. The board had asked me, the policy board had asked me to look into that. Prior to me having a chance to do that, your fire department chief went out and visited the ambulance companies, and I believe it talked about raising the fees in your community from $500 to $30,000. And so by the time I had a chance to meet with them, because I was in Springfield, they're like, wait a minute, Urbana wants to raise our fees, you know, X amount of dollars. We won't have any money to pay into the center. So right now, the city of Champaign is doing what they call a cost of services study, and MetCat is paying our share of that so that they can hopefully cost out what would be a fair fee for the two ambulance companies. Both ambulance companies are aware that we're talking about fees. They're expecting some type of fee. They just want it to be fair. And you know, I don't know how they're going to pay if Urbana's going after them on one side and then MetCat as a county is going after them on another side. That kind of has to be worked out.
Diane?
Well, it's clear to me, in my mind, we're in the middle of a year, and we have a bill to pay to which we agreed by our membership on this policy board. And if we pass this budget amendment tonight, basically it just allocates the money to pay the bill in full, but the city council does not have the authority to actually direct, you know, the finance department to pay the bill. It can't even direct the finance department to make up the deficiency. That ultimately still comes from the mayor's office. But as a city council member, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that we've allocated the funds in case we do need to pay this bill in full, and in case negotiations don't work out the way that it's hoped. So I am going to move that we send resolution number 2015-10-105 to council with a recommendation for approval.
And I'll second.
It's been moved by Marlin and seconded by Madigan to send ordinance number 2015-10-105 to City Council with recommendation for approval. Is there any discussion?
I think we would be in a better negotiating position if you hold off on a budget. I think if you want to negotiate with someone, you do that first. So I would appreciate you holding off on this until we can work out something with the City of Champaign and the MetCat board. And I have a chance to talk to all the other members about how the state situation is affecting them.
Dennis?
Yeah, I think I'd like to do this, but I think I'd like to do it once we have the money at the state level figured out, because then we actually have a real understanding of what their incomes are going to be, how the revenue changes for us with this new percentage of income from phones, and probably allow ourselves to have a little bit more negotiation room in discussing at the state level and at the local level.
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
No.
Chair votes yes. That motion carries. With no other business,
Can I get a roll call on that?
It was 3-2.
Who were the, I was a no. Who else was a no?
Dennis was
Dennis.
a no.
Okay, thank you.
With no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.